Hey everyone, I wanted to show off this new work and just sort of talk through a couple of the things that are going on here with this piece. So these pieces they're simple enough, but they're sort of situated between a couple of different things that I'm sort of thinking about or find interesting lately. Um, and so I'll just dive in and talk about each of those things, I guess, and kind of show you how this thing's put together. So for starters, uh, I use spring collets a lot in my work, and I've sort of been designing around them to use them in my work and to hold different things and as work holding, and somehow all of that is sort of through osmosis soaked in to thinking of them as a like sort of a structural element or a mechanical component of the piece. So these are sort of designed, this thin armature so that there's some flex in the body. And that's just sort of ties into like my preoccupation with spring collets as a conceptual starting point for a piece. This form, this sort of pill shape, is also directly tied into a larger composition I'm working on as part of my work up at the Center for Bits and Atoms. So I've been spending a lot of time with this shape to work out some other thing that I'm developing, and I just wanted to kind of pull it out of that larger design and work on it in a smaller context. So those two things are sort of interconnected. A third thing is that I've just been thinking a lot about this idea. This has a lot of little facets. It's got this sort of jarring sort of I don't know how else to describe it. There's just like a quality of a lot of machined objects have, and that you see popping up in a lot of different like products. And I guess the best thing that I try to describe it is this idea of a tactical aesthetic. I don't want to dive into that too deep because it's kind of a loaded subject, but in my own agnostic sort of way, there's this idea that's sort of flows out of like firearms development, knife making, and other product development, where this idea of a tactical aesthetic has become sort of decoupled from actual functionality. It's just like a look that things have, and that's sort of its own little cultural thing that's happening. And so I think that's sort of fascinating as a design motif. And so I'm starting to like dip into that as a sort of something I'm thinking about as I design pieces. So there's that element as well. So I sort of think of these are just sculptural bead shapes. They don't do anything. They're just for as an aesthetic object, but at the same time they have a tactical quality to them, or at least that was the intention. Maybe not everyone sees them that way, but anyway, that's just something I'm thinking about, and I'm trying to tie all those different ideas together. These just sit on these. I just 3D printed these little stands. I know people have mixed feelings about 3D printed stands, but for me, that's my signifier for this is not part of the sculpture. This is just purely functional. So if it's 3D printed, it's purely functional. But let me show you how these things are put together, because I think that's another more interesting element of this whole thing. In order to do that, I'll bring in some spare parts. So let me put these back. Okay, so here's the body, and I was showing off on some of my social media feeds on how I machined this part, because it's actually a pretty difficult part to machine. And this is sort of like an open armature, right? And it's hard to see, but there's just a tiny, it's open enough that there's just a tiny bit of flex in this. And that's sort of by design. This is sort of the idea of like a spring collet, but this is, I think I can push this idea further in other pieces, but for now, there's just a tiny bit of spring in this. And actually with the stainless steel, once you machine all of this and all of this, and I machined it with these ends, I'll show a picture, with these ends constrained, and once you finally cut these ends free, stainless steel tends to have a bit of internal stress, so when you cut it free, the fingers kind of, we'll call them tines, the tines kind of move a little bit, and so you kind of have to, after you're done, kind of just ensure that it's in the right shape anyway. So the way this goes together, this part just slips in here, and there's nothing that doesn't thread in, there's nothing to retain this. And I think in a future piece, I'd like to design something that actually helps the armature close down on it. But for this piece, a friend of mine, a new friend of mine that I met last summer at the Haystack Mountain School of Craft, he was doing some work where he used, he was doing something with flexures, and he used taper pins. So like a taper pin would slot into a hole where two bodies met, and as that taper got fatter, it would create a wedge between those two objects to keep the parts from coming apart. And I just thought that was really, I mean, his flexure work was really cool, but I thought the use of the taper pin was really clever. And maybe it's a common way of attaching things, I don't know, but to me it was sort of inspiring. But so this isn't that. I didn't use a taper pin, but what I did instead was I created this part with this little radius cut in it, and this pin that has this little radius in it. And these two nest into each other just like that. And when this is inserted, as you can see, there's this hole drilled through here, but the radius on this inner part does not match the outer diameter of the pin, so there's interference. So this doesn't just slot right in. So what you are relying on is that this has enough spring in it to open up to allow the larger diameter to pass through so that the inner diameter can lock in. And let's see if I can get it to go in. Yeah, so as you can see, this flexes up just a little bit, and you can sort of just force it in there. And then that smaller radius is now locked into the radius of the inner pin. So this now can't come out. It can still spin, but it's retained, and then this closes back down. And then there's 3 of those that go all the way around. And so it provides this neat little, visual component, but it also serves a function of being the retaining mechanism for that centerpiece. I thought that was just really like a nice, interesting way to approach an assembly. So these can actually spin. I've got these positioned where I want them for compositional purposes, but I think, and this will vary if you have, if it's brass or stainless, but I think there's a chance that these outer frame can mar that a little bit. But if it was brass, I would say definitely. If you wanted to spin it or be able to spin it, but actually I have, each of these is different. So this one fits more snugly than that one. I think there's a little bit of tolerance work that I still need to do there, but I'm not really sure. I kind of like that. I like the idea of it being fixed pretty firmly, but I also like the idea of it spinning. So I'm not really sure which way to go with it. It might just be a little bit of both. I'm not really sure, but anyway, I wanted to show off how that assembled because that was really interesting to me. Sadly, or not sadly, the inner feature, it just threads in in the old boring way. But one thing that occurred to me after the fact is that I think I'd like to do a second one where the inner piece that threads in, and then the end of this has a taper on it. So as you tighten the inner piece down, it actually forces the inner tines open to grab the inner diameter of this, which would be perfectly on brand for this sort of collet, sculptural collet idea. So I think it's safe to say there's going to be other iterations of this going forward. But for now, I did want to show off these two little guys and get some feedback. So as always, comments, questions are welcome. Thanks.